Okay, good, I like that.
You guys ready?
All right, Mike's hot.
Welcome back to the Best of Investing. I'm Edward Brown, your host, along with my co-host Mark Hanf of Pacific Private Money and Brian Burke of Praxis Capital. When we cut to the first commercial break, we asked this first trivia question. What was the name of the show in the 1960s named after a dolphin that helped apprehend criminals? Brian, I know you know the answer to that.
I wasn't born yet.
Yeah, but you don't know the answer.
Was it Flipper?
It was Flipper, that's right. I don't know if he was a dolphin or if he was a porpoise, but we'll
Is there a
go for
difference?
that. There actually is, but we don't have time to go in for that. Now, before we cut to break though, Brian, you were asking a very good question.
Yeah, I was just asking, in a mediation, is the best outcome when both sides are unhappy?
There is a saying that a good settlement is one where each side is equally unhappy. I'm not really sure that that applies to mediation, and I would look at it really a little bit differently. And this also goes to the question of what are some of the advantages of the mediation process.
Absolutely.
Well, one of the first and most important advantages is that it is a collaborative process where the parties work together with the assistance of a mediator to try to craft a creative outcome to a dispute in a way that a judge or a jury never could do.
So it's not quite as adversarial.
Well, it's adversarial in the sense that each party is coming in with his or her own interests and needs at
Sure.
stake. But what I'm talking about here is that it allows the parties to craft a creative outcome. And an example that I give sometimes when I'm talking with the participants in mediation is the story about the brother and the sister. And I may have mentioned this in our last show. The brother and sister, the little boy and the little girl who are fighting over an orange. And each one wants the orange, and they can't decide who's going to get the orange. So they take the orange to their mom, and they ask their mom to get involved in deciding the outcome of this dispute. And then I usually ask the mediation participants, what do you think the mom did? And the mom typically, or the people in the mediation typically say, well, the mom cut it in half. If the mom had known the little girl wanted the orange in order to make an orange cake, and that the little boy wanted the orange in order to make orange juice, she'd have known the little girl wanted the outside in order to make orange zest for the cake, and the little boy wanted the inside to make the juice, in which event each of them would have gotten what they needed. That's what we call a win-win. And it's a silly little story, but it makes a point that is really a good one, which is in mediation, there doesn't have to be a winner and a loser, and you don't have to have an outcome where each side is equally dissatisfied.
I like the one
So it's
where
not a guilty versus non-guilty.
No, I like where they give the knife to one of the kids, and it says, you cut it, but let the other person choose.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's another way, and actually that is another way of resolving disputes, and sometimes business disputes are resolved that way.
So we talked briefly, Phil, about arbitration. And so, I have a contract in my hand and I'm looking to sign it, and there's what's called an arbitration clause in this contract. Should I be concerned, and why would I not want an arbitration clause in a contract?
Well, the thing that many people don't realize about arbitration is that while the good part is that it can be a quick and efficient way to resolve a dispute, it can also be almost as expensive as the litigation process, particularly if the arbitration clause allows the parties to conduct discovery as they would in litigation, which means the ability to get each other's records and documents, to take depositions and so on. The parties also need to understand that the arbitrator doesn't come to them free. The arbitrator charges for his or her fees and costs as well. And depending upon how complex the dispute is and how long the arbitration is going to take, the arbitration itself can be very, very expensive. The other thing that parties don't always realize when they sign arbitration agreements is that arbitration is not only binding, it is final and non-appealable, which means that once the arbitrator issues his or her award, that's it, except in the most rare cases such as arbitrator fraud, which you never hear of, but that's the only exception to the general rule. It is non-appealable and it's over and done with.
Is it typical to see a contract that might say mediation first, and if that can't be resolved, then arbitration? So is it oftentimes both of them?
Absolutely, and in fact, we refer to those as stepped arbitration and mediation clauses, where first the parties agree to try to resolve the dispute informally with a mediator, and if they can't, then go on to arbitration.
So it sounds like that this could be something that someone entering into a contract or designing a contract to get into business with someone might want to consider something like this, or at least refer to an attorney like yourself to craft such language so you don't go straight to a lawsuit.
Right.
Yeah, that's
And,
good, yeah.
and one of the things to put teeth in that sometimes is put in contracts is that the parties agree that if a dispute arises, that they will first try to resolve the dispute through mediation.
Yes.
And if either side refuses to engage in that informal resolution, then that side cannot recover their attorney's fees, even if they go on litigation, and if the contract provides for an attorney's fees recovery to the prevailing party. You waive that right if you don't first attempt to negotiate in good faith to resolve it.
You know, that's a major thing, because if I'm not mistaken, and again, you're the lawyer, I'm not, if I'm not mistaken, unless a contract calls for legal fees, you generally cannot collect it.
No, you're absolutely right. In our system in California, and typically throughout the U.S., it's basically you pay your own way. That is to say that the only right to recover attorney's fees is if a statute specifically provides for it, and there are certain types of cases where that applies, or if there is a contract that provides for it. Otherwise, you're on your own.
How long does the mediation usually take?
It really varies, Edward, depending upon the number of parties and the complexity of the issues. I would say, as a general rule, typically 1 day. But again, it really varies depending upon what's at stake. I've had mediations that have been as short as a half day. I've had one single session that lasted from 9 in the morning and finished up at 6 o'clock the following morning, literally going all night long. That was a family dispute involving a probate dispute between a father and his estranged adult daughters, and typically family disputes like that are challenging to resolve and take a bit longer.
I'm sure all these old history things get brought up.
They do, and you have to deal with those very carefully and very sensitively, and sometimes that results in the parties literally not wanting to be in the same room together, which means that you spend a lot of time conveying issues back and forth rather than having them all in the same room together to be able to do that a little bit more efficiently. You should also know that there are many mediations that involve more than one session. For example, if you have a multi-party construction defect claim where you've got a homeowner suing a contractor or a developer, and typically then that involves the subcontractors and the sometimes the design professionals and so on. Oftentimes those types of cases require far more than just one session in order to resolve.
I suspect that it probably takes a little bit of preparation to go to a mediation session. You don't just want to show up without having any preparation at all. So do you have any advice as to what works and what doesn't in order for a mediation to be successful?
You bet. And you really hit the nail on the head when you said preparation, Brian. I would say the single most important key to a successful outcome, and by successful outcome I mean reaching an agreement that the parties agree to on their own with the mediator's assistance, is preparation. The mediation doesn't happen in a vacuum, and there is a lot of prep work that goes into it before the parties ever even get together. I think of myself as a mediator, as I'll refer to it as the captain of a resolution team, with that team being all of the parties, their attorneys, and myself, and we'll come back to that in a minute.
Yeah, we'll come back to that after a break. Okay, here's our second trivia question, and again, we're in the studio with Phil Diamond, who's an attorney who specializes in mediation. Here's the second trivia question. This horse had his own show and could talk to his owner and usually said, Wilbur. The first 3 callers with the correct answer win a free 3-day, 2-night stay at the Lighthouse Resort. Their website is lighthouseforfun.com. Call 888-912-1190. That's 888-912-1190 to answer this question. This horse had his own show and could talk to his owner and usually said, Wilbur. That's not too bad,
actually
huh?
really good.
Okay, call 888-912-1190. Make sure to include your name, address, and email address and phone number also. We'll be right back.